Hello there, and a very warm welcome to today's Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're joining us because today we are untangling a truly fascinating and honestly a rather counterintuitive paradox in the world of global business. We're going to dive deep into the highly complex relationship between an expatriate's professional success and their personal happiness. Let's get right into it and see why hitting absolutely all your targets abroad might actually be a recipe for misery. To do this, we'll trace the exact logical flow of a brilliant 2023 organizational psychology research paper. We'll be moving through the introduction, theoretical framework, methodology, results, and finally, the discussion. Right, let's kick things off with Section 1, Introduction, the VUCA world and global workers. Modern global workers have to navigate a world that is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. It is intense out there. Which brings us to the provocative question at the very heart of today's Explainer. Can being too successful actually make you miserable? We naturally assume that achieving our goals brings happiness. But what if, in the incredibly high-stakes environment of international business, pushing too hard for corporate goals actively drains a worker's happiness? To really understand this, we need to be clear about who exactly we're looking at. The researchers focus specifically on assigned expatriates, or AEs. These are global workers who voluntarily take on a temporary international assignment to achieve specific organizational goals. Things like transferring knowledge or maybe controlling a foreign subsidiary. Now, historically, research has absolutely obsessed over their performance, completely neglecting their subjective well-being. Basically, nobody was asking, are these highly skilled professionals actually experiencing any genuine pleasure, happiness while they're living abroad? Let's move on to Section 2, Theoretical Framework, Fuel versus Load. To figure out what makes these expatriates tick, I want you to think of a balance between your engine's fuel and the heavy load you have to carry. The foundation of this entire idea is the happy, productive worker hypothesis. It's an elegant theory, really. It suggests that all things being equal, happy workers, meaning those with high subjective well-being, are significantly more productive than their less happy peers. Subjective well-being isn't just about, smiling at your desk. It is a critical, tangible driver of job satisfaction and overall performance. To see how this plays out in practice, the researchers use something called the Job Demands Resources, or JDR model. And this is exactly where our fuel and load metaphor comes in. Think of job resources as your fuel. For an expat, a massive resource is interaction adjustment. That means feeling comfortable making local friends, chatting with host country nationals, just really familiarizing yourself with the local culture. It gives you psychological comfort. But on the other side of the scale, we have job demands. This is your heavy load. And for an expatriate, the primary demand is the enforcement of strict organizational goals. It's that relentless pressure from headquarters to hit those KPIs. So these concepts all tie together in what's proposed as a model of moderated mediation. The hypothesis is quite straightforward at first. Interaction adjustment, our fuel, drives subjective well-being, which in turn directly leads to higher job satisfaction. However, that's where the heavy organizational goals come in. The researchers theorize that if this load gets too heavy, the massive burden of corporate goals might actually completely crush that positive flow of happiness and satisfaction. Okay, on to Section 3, Methodology. Who was studied? To actually test this theory out in the real world, the researchers didn't just guess. They surveyed a very specific sample size of 148 assigned expatriates. These were Spanish expatriates, and they averaged about 34 years of age. They had been working abroad for nearly 2 years on average, around 21 months, and the vast majority were highly educated, working in medium to high complexity roles across major sectors like services, engineering, and oil and gas. So, just to be clear, we are talking about highly qualified professionals dealing with some very serious responsibilities. Which brings us to the really juicy bit. Section 4, Results, the big reveal. First off, the good news. The data absolutely confirmed the baseline theory. Step 1, when expats feel comfortable interacting with locals. When they have plenty of that fuel, it successfully drives Step 2, subjective well-being. And having that well-being directly results in Step 3, higher job satisfaction. So happiness genuinely works. But, and it is a very big but, what on earth happens when headquarters turns up the heat? When we look at well-being plotted against interaction adjustment, the picture becomes incredibly clear. For expats who have a lower general aim, meaning the demand to hit corporate goals is actually reasonable, as their interaction adjustment goes up, their well-being rises sharply.
It's a great trajectory. But for those expats who are under massive pressure to achieve high organizational goals, their well-being completely flatlines. Even if they adjust brilliantly to the local culture, the immense pressure of their corporate demands totally neutralizes their happiness. The load is simply too heavy for the fuel to make any difference whatsoever.
And we see a remarkably similar story when examining the interactive effects on actual job satisfaction. When corporate goals are lower and more manageable, high well-being leads directly to skyrocketing job satisfaction. But for those burdened with really high organizational aims, the positive effect of well-being on job satisfaction gets severely reduced. The goals literally stop being a challenging motivator, and instead, they morph into what psychologists call a hindrance stressor.
The absolute core of this issue is captured perfectly in this quote from the researchers. They state, expatriates can accomplish the organizational aims for the assignment at the expense of reducing their subjective well-being and job satisfaction. I mean, that is the harsh reality of the data right there. Striving relentlessly for externally defined corporate goals actively depletes an expatriate's happiness. Yes, they might hit every single target headquarters sets for them, but they are going to be miserable doing it.
So, what do we do about this? Let's look at Section 5, Discussion, Managerial Implications. How can HR professionals and global managers actually fix this glaring problem? Well, we have to confront the paradox head-on. The data explicitly shows that, under current models, any strict performance gains necessarily imply and involve some loss pertaining to subjective well-being. Building global competitiveness without endangering your workers' well-being requires a deeply delicate balancing act. You simply cannot squeeze your top talent for metrics without draining their happiness dry. To keep those fuel tanks full and the loads manageable, organizations have to take practical, evidence-based steps. First off, HR must actively create conditions that encourage successful host country interactions. Don't just give an expat a desk and a massive target, give them the time and the tools to integrate and build local relationships. Remember, that's their fuel. Secondly, you have to align personal goals with organizational goals. When an externally mandated goal totally conflicts with what the worker personally values, it creates immense stress. Finding the overlap is what turns a hindrance, stressor, back into a healthy, motivating challenge. And finally, leaders must actively monitor goal progress to prevent burnout. You have to recognize when the mentality of striving for more stops being productive and starts being destructive. Which leaves us with a genuinely profound question to ponder today. How will your organization balance the relentless drive for metrics with the fragile foundation of human happiness? Because as this research so clearly shows us, hitting absolutely all of your targets doesn't mean a thing if the very people hitting them are just too burnt out to care. Thank you so much for joining me on this academic journey today. I really hope this explainer has given you a fresh, perhaps slightly surprising perspective on the true cost of success in the global workplace. The formal citation for the brilliant research we unpacked today is right here for your reference. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and above all, try to be happy while you can. Cheers!